It's nice to be with you. I'm Mark Banchik. I'm a child psychiatrist, but most importantly, in this setting, I am a co-founding member of ACF, Alumnis for Campus Fairness. At Vassar College many years ago, we had issues with anti-Semitism and anti-Israel thinking, and Jewish students and non-Jewish students who were supportive of Israel were really marginalized and attacked. And we even had Professor Puar come to campus that Scott Shays talked about, spreading her bile. And we actually showed up and countered it and got a lot of results at Vassar, including a new president that would take responsibility for that. But it was a very powerful experience, and we started ACF, which is now run and beautifully by Avi Gordon and Joel Bonds. So I want to now segue into this session. Community activists at the forefront. And we have two speakers today. I don't know, Ra'ifa, you still don't have a connection. I was wondering if you can call me somehow and I could just put you on speakerphone. I'll give you my telephone number, 914-71, no, okay. Okay, just want to try to be creative. Okay, so let me introduce the two of you. And we'll get right into the questions. Ra'ifa won't be able to talk, but she is the Director of Communication and Programming at the Academic Engagement Network, which I've had personal experience with Mark Rudolph, and I was very happy with the work they're doing with alumni, with college professors. Ra'ifa is responsible for communications with AEN members, media outlets, and AEN partner organizations and stakeholders, developing select AEM programmings and initiatives. And I'm sorry that she can't be presenting. I'm hopeful that will change. But I'm very interested in how faculty can be engaged in this fight against anti-Semitism and this fight to promote a marketplace of ideas on college campuses and protect Jewish students. I do have Nelson Franz here, a very articulate and intelligent man. He is a director in partnerships and development at the Combat Antisemitism Movement, CAM. Nelson manages connections to over 500 organizations representing 1.5 million members, committing to fighting this important goal. Now, would you be kind enough, Nelson, to, in your own words, tell me about your organization and what your involvement is?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mark, for moderating this panel and for having the vision to innovate a network which focuses on anti-Semitic incidents on college campuses and activates their respective alumni to solve them. I also want to thank your executive director, Avi Gordon, as you mentioned, Joel Bond, and the rest of the ACF professional and leadership team for hosting this conversation as part of your annual conference, Growing the Movement Together. To Ra'ifa of the Academic Engagement Network, it's a pleasure to serve on this panel with you. As Mark, as you said, my name is Nelson, and my role at the Combat Antisemitism Movement, also known as CAM, is working with our global coalition to engage 1.5 million people and more than 500 organizations from a diverse array of political, cultural, and faith backgrounds in the common mission of fighting the world's oldest hatred. Now, we have professionals at CAM working in Asia, North America, and South America, and we're in the process of launching on-the-ground operations in Europe. Again, thank you, ACF, for allowing CAM to participate in this pivotal program. I look forward to our discussion and to answering questions from the audience.
Yes. Before we move on, tell me, how do these organizations find you? How do they hook up with you?
It's a great question. We're 3 years young. So in those 3 years, we've grown in a number of ways. First of all, we reach out to organizations who, on a local level, on a national level, on an international level, are creating change or taking action, whether it be running campaigns, hosting events like this one, conferences. The Combat Antisemitism Movement is a platform. We're a platform for engaged organizations to share the best and brightest from their respective movements. So if there's a petition, if there's a virtual event, if there's an in-person gathering, maybe there's an article written, by one of our partner organizations, we think it's important to highlight those successes, to highlight those opportunities, because we are engaging organizations from across the world, from all different backgrounds, and it's important for those in the United States to see what's happening in Europe and vice versa, and those on college campuses, in particular faculty and alumni and students, to see the successes, but also the challenges from other campuses and communities from around the world. So we really do connect these networks and make sure that through a series of major events, through our research operations, and of course, through our partnerships and participating in programs like this one, that we're able to amplify the coalition's work in eradicating the world's oldest hatred. We all know it, anti-Semitism.
Yes. Now, so just to the nub of it, and we'll move on. In your considerable with your expertise, why is it now that anti-Semitism is becoming so virulent? It's always been around, but like a virus, something gets worse, something becomes more profound, something more pathological. Why now, you think?
Sure. So again, this is a perfect storm. We don't believe that anti-Semitism somehow disappeared or went away. It was always there. But in the current society we live in the climate, the advent of social media, one thing that we're tracking and looking at is anti-Semitism in the digital space.
On the right as well.
Sure. And what I would say is, we monitor and track anti-Semitism, whether it come from the extreme left, whether it come from the extreme right, whether it come from factions within Islamist motivations. So I say that because no political ideology anywhere in the world on any campus owns anti-Semitism. It is a problem for the Jewish community and for people of good conscience all around the world. And we see this play out, whether it come from virulent anti-Zionists, or whether it come from white nationalists, or whether it come from radical Islamists. The reality is, whether you don't like the Jews because we have a state, or whether because we exist, either way, it's not good. And it speaks to the larger issue of the hate and bigotry that has existed not just in this country, but across the world for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Again, being the world's oldest hatred, which I remind people.
And it is a dangerous sign of the world situation in any culture in particular, because we are hated because we are successful commercially. We're hated because we're communists. We're hated because we're religious. We're hated because we're secular. We're hated because we're state. We're hated because we assimilate. We're hated because we're loud. We're hated because we're manipulative behind the scenes. We're hated because we're powerless and poor. We're hated because we control the press. And so, please.
No, and I would just say, and I want to get into this USC faculty letter and the Middle East Studies Association, some of these other issues, especially the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism.
We'll get yes.
But you're right. This is a pivotal moment when it comes to anti-Semitism. And what's most important is for our audience out there, for you, Mark, for the ACF team, to know that we are not powerless, that relationships matter, that education matters. And that's why we focus on everything from Holocaust education to philo-Semitism and educating about the Jewish community, because when the Jewish community is viewed as the other, when Israelis or Zionists are viewed as the other, people fear the other. People tend to treat the other as beyond the community. And for us at the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, we believe that no Jew anywhere in the world should live in fear for their safety. And that includes today's college campuses, that includes alumni, that includes faculty, regardless of their faith. They should be able to express their viewpoints without fear of retribution, and certainly without fear of threat of violence.
Perfect segue. So we at Alumnis for Campus Fairness organize alumni around the country, almost like chapters. Each group, each university has a chapter, and that chapter, because they're alumni, because they're connected, and because they belong to the university,
Right.
have power.
They're members
and
of that
say.
community.
We have power and say.
Yep.
And now that we're exposing that there's outrage because the university is not living up to its standards, which brings us right to the USC letter. Tell me about the USA letter from faculty and why this is important, what it is and why it's important.
Yeah, so University of Southern California, which is in the greater Los Angeles area, there was a letter written by faculty members of all different backgrounds, all different disciplines, all different faiths. And the letter went to the university president. It went to the provost. And the letter came about because when a female student body president, Rose Rich, resigns from office due to relentless attacks on her Jewish identity and her support for Israel, when 130 university departments and centers endorse a biased anti-Semitic attack on the values of academic freedom, and when a DEI student leader, not just any student leader, student government leader, violates university policy and state law for the state of California by calling for violence against students, and not just any students, but particularly Zionist students. I won't repeat what the tweet said. It was too vulgar for this conference, but the University of Southern California has a problem on their hands. This is not one isolated incident. We at the Combat Anti-Semitism movement, we look for trends. And if you look at the way that the faculty mobilized, this was not one time. This was after a series of attacks, both on social media, not just against one Jewish student, but against all Jewish students. And again, USC, the University of Southern California, needs to be taking the concerns of its faculty and of course of ACF members seriously.
Yes.
You all are the community leaders. You have a say, you have a voice in this fight.
Yes, we do.
We need to find more ways to activate you.
Yes. What makes it difficult for professors who are pro-Israel or pro-Jewish or pro-Zionist to step forward? This is a big step, but why should it even be a big step?
Yeah, so first of all, let's just take stock of what universities are. They're large, they're slow-moving bureaucratic entities, and given the current climate in the United States, and particularly on college campuses, one should not be surprised by this perfect storm where less than 80 years after the Holocaust, administrations are inadequate in their responses to the concerns of Jewish students, faculty, and alumni. Now, why did this group come forward? What motivated them? They were fed up. They were exhausted. They were tired. So they mobilized and they decided
like
to take
we all are at this conference. Please continue.
Absolutely. The reason why the people are at this conference are because they want to take action. The people here are the doers. It's enough people saying what they want to do. We need people to really come forward and unite as a community and as a network around this important issue. So it's important to recognize the courage and values of these faculty members for coming forward with their good deeds, as well as you, Mark, and the other ACF leaders who, as alumni, said, I care about my institution, whether it be Vassar, whether it be Brown, whether it be New York University, Columbia, et cetera. And I'm willing to put my name and my reputation forward to say that I'm not going to be quiet anymore. And that's an issue that faculty
and I'm willing to be disliked a little bit because I'm standing up for something. Please.
Absolutely, and you know, I'll take this out to the broader piece. Why are faculty, why are alumni so quiet, and what can be done about this?
Yes,
I mean,
please.
It's fear of being canceled, of being fired, of being isolated, not just on campus, but in one's own profession. And my advice to solve this problem is we need to amplify the critical initiatives that groups like the Academic Engagement Network, and Scholarship Peace in the Middle East, under Asaf Romorowski, and the Louis D. Brandeis Center, and others, you know, Stand With Us under Roz Rothstein, who are advocating and educating the public on these issues, and most importantly, how to fight back, to not just lay down when we are told what is hateful or what is or is not hurtful to our people, but rather to say we have a voice in this fight and we're going to use that voice.
So the audience really understands this. The line in the sand has been crossed. The university faculty have stood up against BDS on
Right.
paper. This does not happen often. So the critical thing that made it happen was it was just too much.
Yep. Absolutely. And maybe, just on the DEI issue, because I know that's kind of like the phrase that pays this year is diversity,
Right, of
equity, and
course.
inclusion. We should be cautious. We should be open-minded, but we should be cautious. One would think, Mark, that Jewish students, Israeli students who support Israel,
Yes.
would be protected the same as any other minority,
Right.
nationality, or free speech viewpoint in this country, especially at universities of free learning. Sadly, this is not the case. Jews are a minority on American college campuses, full stop. They should have every right and every opportunity for equity and inclusion on today's diverse institutions of higher education. Now, administrations need to, I implore them, they must protect all members of their student body.
Yes.
When threats like the one against Jewish students, which was made by a member of their student body, like Yasmin Mashayek,
Yes.
There should be a zero tolerance policy. It doesn't matter what
violence,
faith, what background, what nationality.
Yes.
Academic institutions cannot become a place where violence is tolerated, not by anyone, and really not for any
violent speech, including violent speech.
Right, including violent hate speech and the threat of violence.
Exactly.
Because what we've seen, and again, thank God that there were no congregation lives that were lost in Colleyville, Texas. But through chatter, and online through social media, these words matter. There is an awful echo chamber, especially on Twitter, but on Instagram and Facebook and using bots. Whether out of Russia or Iran or by proxies from the detractor community, it's important to note that their aim is to defame and to detract, and to make the issue of Zionism, to make the issue of the state of Israel, the one and only Jewish and democratic state, to make the Jewish people a pariah. These are tactics that were used 80 years ago, 90 years ago in Europe, and we cannot stand for it. We know that this terminology of anti-Zionism, this anti-Semitism of our modern era, these contemporary forms which manifest itself, we've seen this before. We know how this ends. So we cannot continue to be powerless and voiceless in this fight. We have to unite and work together.
And I'm sorry for interrupting because we're having a real conversation here. Forgive me. In medicine we have something called the contagion effect. If there's a suicidal attempt in a high school, there's a higher chance there'll be another suicide attempt in high school.
Right.
If there's a suicide attempt in a community, there's a chance there'll be another one nearby. So this is a contagion effect. If someone is using violent speech against Jews and against people who support Israel, there is a reasonable chance that there's going to be contagion, if not at the university, in the culture at large.
And we've seen this, Mark. I mean, we've seen attacks on Jewish institutions in the United States, right? In the last few weeks, the number of bomb threats against JCCs and synagogues have skyrocketed. You don't have to look far to see Tree of Life in Pittsburgh, to see Poway Chabad, to see Overland, Kansas, the JCC there.
And then for it to spread to
goes on and on, right? And Muncie
LGBT, and to spread to the LGBTQ community, to spread to other communities of color, and this is something that is unacceptable for the culture at large. And we'll get back.
Yes, and Mark, I think just in general, it's important to note that if we see something, we need to say something, and that for those of our audience members and for everyone involved with ACF and with AAN, when we see threats, whether they be violent in nature, but language that is clearly charged and has the potential to spill over from simple tension into in real life, as we call it, IRL actions, we must say something to the authorities. We must alert our local communities, and to not be silent, because we know that when this chatter comes up, it can at times lead to action. Most of the time it is just chatter. But there's a number of organizations who are focused on this. We're one of them, and we have to maintain our vigilance and protect our communities.
But you know what, Nelson? There's also a positive contagion. Positive contagion is These professors stood up. They are putting themselves in harm's way. That
They
radical,
are righteous actors.
yes, they are in a position where they could be critiqued in ways. Look, no one's going to fire me because I went to Vassar and made trouble. I'm a
Right.
doctor. But they're professors on a college campus. They could be shunned to their institutions. They can be marginalized. Many things can happen. They are brave. Now, that the
They are.
contagion is that this should be happening in many other campuses around the country. Can we promote that contagion? A good contagion.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that the work that Alumnis for Campus Fairness
Yes.
is doing, the work that Academic Engagement Network's doing, that Scholars for Peace in the Middle East and others, we are focused on this. I mean, I think we have to create networks and coalitions, and then from there, those coalitions then become true movements. And so it is incredibly impressive to see what ACF and others have done on campuses, including USC and others. And I have to believe that this is just the starting point of what we can accomplish when we unify across the country.
And there's a positive energy, and there's a positive energy here. We're not just angry people who are fighting. We believe in something that is really wholesome, a marketplace of ideas, a place of civility, a university that sits as a place of wholesomeness, almost spiritual value, not a political landmine, not the street. We're fighting for something that we believe in, that really we consider very sacred. Let's go on to Mesa, and tell me what happened with Mesa, with the Middle East Studies Association, why it's important, what we could do about it.
Absolutely. So for those that don't know, Mesa passed, adopted, endorsed, what have you, the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, the most hateful, divisive movement we've seen within the academic arena for generations. Now, this is not something new. The American Studies Association, ASA, the Modern Language Association, MLA, and the Middle East Studies Association.
There's Asian American as well, I think.
And there have been others have used the BDS playbook to promote hate-fueled agendas since 2013, if not earlier. Now, MESA is a political learned society. They dropped non-political from their bylaws in 2017, and their actions over the last 5 years have lowered their membership from having affiliated centers and departments on over 50 campuses to a measly 30. Now, there's fallout from this. Not everyone voted for this referendum. There were 167 brave members who voted against this hateful referendum, and their voices matter in this fight. And I know that AEN and others have been amplifying those voices. We must recognize that MESA's actions in recent months, but particularly last month where they formally adopted BDS, have positioned themselves as ideologically corrupt. And MESA should be considered as the radical activists and extremist propagandists that they truly are. Now, will other associations endorse BDS because of MESA? Maybe, maybe not. The reality is academic associations who are already political in nature may look to this. But I don't see a groundswell of support for the profiles and courage taken by MESA leadership. When ASA adopted a resolution supporting BDS in December 2013, it didn't yield widespread praise in academia. In fact, it drew international condemnation from diverse interfaith and interdisciplinary individuals who united against the hateful rhetoric and motion by the ASA. So this is a problem. People should pay attention to it. But at the same time, we shouldn't overreact. We shouldn't think that every academic association is out to get Israel, because many, if not most, are not political in nature. They want to support academic freedom. They want to work with their counterparts in Israel, whether they be Israeli institutions of higher learning, and they want to have faculty exchanges. I think that's something that is really critical, is faculty exchanges both from the United States to Israel and vice versa. As well as study abroad opportunities, having Israeli students, American students, but particularly graduate students in the graduate fields of study, having them have the opportunity to study abroad in each other's countries, I think is really key to this, as well as conducting research papers and collaboration that furthers the study, not just of the Middle East, not just of American studies or modern languages, but of all disciplines, knowing that all disciplines have an opportunity to engage with Israeli institutions and with American faculty who believe in said exchange.
Yeah. So I think that the university, I, the, my experience working with
Yes.
children and parents over the years as a child psychiatrist and adolescent psychiatrist, in addition to this work with ACF, parents do not like this.
Right.
Parents do not like this. This is not something that's going to go down well in the culture if universities become radicalized political places. So the fact that Mesa is losing support on campus, overall, because they become so radicalized, is music to my ears, and I'd like to see us speak about that more openly. I want to make one other point we discussed last time,
Please.
and this once again comes from the field of psychiatry, but I think it's really important politically. Really important politically. Like I work in divorce or
Yep.
in severe conflict. When one party really believes their story, and usually it's the sicker party. I do not want to psychologize the BDS, but usually one party believes their story and the other party is ambivalent about the story. And all of us are ambivalent. We have ambivalence about Israel. We love Israel. We know Israel makes mistakes. We love the Jewish people. We know the Jewish people make mistakes. We have a mature relationship. We're married to somebody. We have a boyfriend or girlfriend. We are jobs. There's good things and there's bad things. We have healthy relationships. People who are not so healthy, what they do is they have one narrative that it's all the other person's fault. And when a person is unambivalent and in a conflict with a person who is ambivalent, it's bad for who? For the ambivalent person. And that's why psychologically it's so powerful for these BDS people to be on point and so disabling to us. I'd like your thoughts about that, Nelson.
Well, the question of what can be done to slow the trend or to change, the direction, is simple. We need to amplify anti-BDS voices from within civil society. This includes mayors, ambassadors, heads of state, and leaders at the local, national, and international levels. And our goal for this trend must be bolder than aiming to slow it. I would encourage us to work together to defeat this evil by exposing their lies, their double standards, and their outright anti-Semitism towards the Jewish people. And what makes groups allies of moderation? What can we do with the moderates? Because I have to believe that
they're out there.
Most are moderates. Most are not on the far right or the far left. Are moderate voices. We need extremists, especially in education, whether from the far right, the far left, or those with Islamist motivations, who can be a threat to the safety of Jews and the protection of academic freedom. We need to pay attention. We need to pay attention to the extreme voices, but also, most importantly, to engage the moderates and work together to understand that we can listen to diverse perspectives and opinions and approaches, but it doesn't change what our interests are, or what our values are, or our support for Israel, or our Jewish faith, for those of us who are Jewish.
It's funny, it all comes back to core values, whether it's psychotherapy or whether it's politics. Really, our core values are a marketplace of ideas, civility, the ability to talk through differences, and education. These are values. And anybody that sports USC or Vassar or Oberlin or NYU or University of Texas or Austin or University of Miami, wherever you want us, this is what we stand for.
Right.
And BDS and their supporters are corrosive in their approach to these values. And how do we promote the fact that BDS and their supporters are so destructive to the very things we love, and the moderates throughout the country who love the same thing?
Yeah, no, it's an important question. I think we need to listen to each other, and we need to work together and know that the Combat Anti-Semitism movement, the organization I work for, working hand in hand with Alumnis for Campus Fairness and engaging with Academic Engagement Network and others, that we are not powerless in this fight, that we do have a voice and we must use that voice.
And if people are ambivalent about Israel, It doesn't
Right.
mean they can't protect Israel and protect the rights of people to support Israel. I want
Sure.
to talk about IRA because I think you have a lot to say about IRA. And Rifa, I am looking forward to really speaking to you at length at some point. I am so glad you're here. AEN to me is one of the wonderful organizations in the country. I've spoken to Mark Udoff. Their letter his letter with Professor Walter, I believe it was, in the Wall Street Journal was absolutely critical in moving things at faster. So this was these are very, very important people. So let's talk about IRA. What your thoughts about the definition, how it's impacted anti-Semitism around the world, what are the and the critics of IRA, why are they why should they be listened to or not listened to?
Sure. So the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism, commonly referred to as IRA, has been adopted or endorsed by more than 850 entities across the world. Just in 2021 alone, which was a watershed moment for this definition, 200 entities, including 31 countries and 314 institutions of higher education, adopted or endorse this definition. Now, the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism is the North Star for the Combat Anti-Semitism movement, and educating about its use and the 11 examples which accompany it is our primary focus. We believe that this recent report that we produced, the 2021 IRA Adoption or Endorsement Report,
yes.
Which was released in partnership with the Cantor Center at Tel Aviv University, demonstrates the effectiveness and importance of advocating for this definition. Of course, there have been critics over the years, but we view IRA as the gold standard when it comes to definitions of anti-Semitism. And this is a definition that has been adopted by countries, Muslim majority countries like Albania, Christian majority countries, of course, but by most Western nations, both in Europe, the United States, and beyond. And I just have to say that we believe that this definition is important for the safety and security of Jews across the world. And we would not be fighting for this definition if we didn't believe that it could save lives.
What is the direct consequence of countries or counties or municipalities adopting this definition? Is there a direct consequence?
Absolutely. So it ranges dependent on the legislation and the adoption. But most times it means working with law enforcement, working to ensure that these various incidents are tracked and monitored and recorded. A lot of the work that we do is monitoring media reported incidents of anti-Semitism, which are defined by the IRA definition. And so not just those which constitute a hate crime against a Jewish person, but rather those which under the definition, which include forms of anti-Zionism, those fall within the definition. And so
you mentioned last session that when a country such as or a municipality takes on this definition, it has a trickle-down effect on the universities. Could you?
And we've seen this in the report. We mentioned this, that when a country adopts the definition on the national level, the educational institutions follow.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah, it absolutely is, because it's coming from a place of authority from governmental leadership. This was the case in the United Kingdom. In December 2016, the United Kingdom adopted the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism. 5 years later, most local authorities and higher education institutions have adopted that definition. This includes the City of London. This includes 236 universities in the UK. Those 236 universities are 236 of the 314 institutions that have adopted this. So, I give entire credit to CAM advisory board member who also serves as UK government independent advisor on anti-Semitism, Lord John Mann, who's leading the effort to have 60 institutions in 2021 alone, for a total of 314 institutions in the UK who've now adopted or endorsed the IRA working definition. And again, Lord John Mann is one of many leaders across the world. You look at Erwin Kotler, You look at others, Irwin in Canada and others throughout the world who are fighting for this. They are putting their careers into this.
Let's unpack this a little bit. I mean, it is very interesting. It's very powerful that people are stepping forward, and everybody who's on this conference understands. So, what is it about IRA that's so noxious to the BDS movement?
Yeah, I think the main point is understanding that anti-Zionism and the BDS movement has a clear goal, and that is the destruction of the one and only Jewish state. So when we talk about the combat anti-Semitism movement and our goal and our vision being to help create a world where no Jew anywhere should have to live in fear for their own safety. The BDS movement kind of goes directly against that, saying that from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and that there won't be a Jewish and democratic state of Israel. That is a fantasy. That is a direct attack on the sovereignty of the one and only Jewish state, and all people of good conscience, not just the Jewish community, but those in the Hellenic community, those in the Muslim faith, Christians, whether they be Catholic, or Presbyterian, or any faith in any background anywhere in the world, should be paying attention to this playbook that's being used, because we've seen this before in the history of the world.
So
you look at 1930s Germany, you look at Europe, trying to treat the Jewish community, the Jewish state, as the other. And we know where this leads, and it can unfortunately lead to violence against the Jewish people. And I just implore all of us to pay attention to what's happening around us and the language that's being used to vilify the people in the state of Israel.
We only have a few more moments left.
Please.
We have any final remarks you'd like to make, and maybe some kind and good things we can say about AEN, because I
absolutely
love this organization.
Absolutely, Mark. So just with the limited moments we have, I encourage your alumni and those in this conference to visit our website.
I'm sorry, just at the very, very, very end of this.
Go for it, Rafa. Go for it.
Czech people finally figured out the problem. My apologies to everyone.
Just
I can't say everything. I wanted to say thank you, Nelson. Thank you, Mark. Again, my apologies. Thank you to ACF for the invitation. I tried to put as much as I could in the chat, but faculty are a very integral part of this. They're the ones who are going to be teaching the courses that go against the BDS narrative. They're the ones who are going to be mentoring students who are impacted by this. And again, I'm sorry for the echo here. So I want to thank all of you. I want to talk about how much I appreciate this collaborative effort. Faculty are a very significant part of this. It's a challenging environment, but you have brave faculty who are going against this entrenched movement.
And as we end, can you tell us a little bit about your role at AEN and how you're helpful with faculty and with alumni?
Of course. And again, I apologize. I can't say all that I want to, but we are a network of over 800 faculty members around the country, and they are committed to opposing BDS, opposing the delegitimization of Israel, to promoting a robust study of Israel in the Middle East in the academy, and to confronting anti-Semitism wherever it occurs, while upholding the values of free speech and academic freedom. Our faculty members are devoted to this mission, and we engage with them in a variety of ways. Most relevant, I think, to your work is how we work together with community members, with alumni, with students to leverage their connection with the administration to make change on campus.
Now, how do you think you can leverage what happened at USC to move forward with faculty actually taking on BDS?
I think the way you leverage it is to show that there is a united and connected and very passionate group of faculty who care about this issue and who will not let up. I think they're willing to use their academic expertise, they're willing to use their connections to the administration, and they're willing to go public. They're willing to go public to the media, and I think that makes a real difference. So the administration feels pressure to act in these circumstances.
Well, it's very good that they stepped forward, and can be a contagion effect, as we talked about. And what about in Mesa, those that did not support the? Is there any way to get to those people? And
There is. So again, remember that not everyone who didn't support the Mesa resolution, that doesn't necessarily mean that this is something that they're 100% committed to on the other side. But we want to. We do want to leverage this. We want to say you don't necessarily have to be advocates for Israel, but we want you to be advocates for academic freedom. We want you to be advocates for the principles of the academy, which is your work. And what Miss
and Rafa, just going off that though, isn't it important to amplify the work of like ASMEA, the Association of Studies of Middle, right? Because it's a non-political entity.
Exactly, and ASMEA was founded sort of in response to the over-politicization of Mesa many years ago. This has been going on for a while, even many years before the BDS vote. We want to promote the work of ASMEA. Many of our members are active in ASMEA, those who have academic expertise. And we want to show this. We want to show that there are ways of engaging academically with the Middle East that doesn't involve demonizing Israel or promoting one-sided narratives about the Middle East or politicizing an academic organization. And through organizations like ASMEA, I mentioned this in the chat in the previous session, we want to be able to really highlight some of these really new and very exciting collaborative agreements that have taken place between the Abraham Accords countries. So you have Moroccan and Bahraini and Emirati academic institutions signing memoranda of understanding with Israeli ones. And you see this great potential for cross-cultural, cross-national, cross-religious understanding happening in the Middle East. And that serves as this very poignant contrast to some of the more negative trends you see on the US campuses.